All right, welcome, Davida,
Thank you.
on the show here, where we met 2 years ago at the Catapult Future Fest and had a conversation about um, about the constitution of the self, basically, about how you can stabilize yourself in this turmoil that we're in this world. And this led to us having that conversation today about what I call deep alignment, which is one element in the full circle feedback cycle that describes that we have to start with deeply aligning ourselves, grounding, rooting ourselves in within ourselves in order to be able to step out, make sense of the world, try and define a goal that guides us, and then start building that world that we see, which is so needed right now. And today we'll focus, as I said, on deep alignment. And with that, I would like to give you the word on an introduction, who you are and why we're talking about this, and then you can dive right in and I will keep asking questions. Looking forward. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for this introduction and for hearing it resonates with so many levels. I work with change makers and leaders for around a decade, specifically in the field of mobilizing social and environmental change. And while I was doing that work, I came across another field, and that is many of my colleagues and the people I work with are going through some emotional roller coaster. And I was curious to know how come that people who care about anything and anyone else, from the environment through people to entire communities, forget the bit of self-care. Why do so many people get burnt out eventually? And this is how I got to explore it. And this is also what I'm focusing mainly today, burnout prevention, specifically amongst leaders and change makers. Mm-hmm. So this piece of self-alignment, I don't know if surprisingly or not, is highly connected to the feeling of approaching burnout. And that could happen either when we are disconnected from a meaningful cause that we are working towards, mm-hmm. or, and this is even more interesting, that we are so connected and so passionate, mm-hmm. right? We are fully aligned that the boundaries dissolve. It's almost like we are forgetting other practices that could help us maintain some sort of a balance there. Mm-hmm. So this deep alignment is so important in one way to help us navigate our path forward as change makers, right? But at the same time, how do we set those boundaries for self-care so we won't burn out, so we'll keep, pushing forward, keep bringing this change that we are so aligned with, but in a way that will not harm us and eventually our mission.
Mm-hmm. So you're pointing in two directions, and I would like to explore both. One is, without a clear objective, you might get lost, and this might lead to burnout. And with a clear objective, you might start taking less care of yourself because you're taking so much care of your mission that you're also burning out. And so what are the tools that you find helpful in helping people to identify an objective that they want to work towards? And also, if they have one, sometimes it's not one that is aligned with them. And they can either choose to align a new objective with themselves, or to align themselves with the objective. Because they might, with their prefrontal cortex, they might be aligned with the objective they've chosen, but their subconscious is telling them something different. So they could either align it with their subconscious, or they can align it with their prefrontal, but they have to align the rest with all of that. So what are the tools that you're using for that?
Yeah, so I would say there are different set of tools. So if you start by focusing on this alignment, what do you do when you're not sure what is the direction, when you need more clarity, basically? The tools are obviously always around, circling around the field of self-inquiry, self-exploration. Mm-hmm. And that could, vary from journaling, which is part of the observing yourself over a period of time. It could go to analytic tools like SWOT analysis, but on the self. Mm-hmm. We used to do SWOT analysis on organizations, but what if we do it on ourselves? What are my strengths and weaknesses, and what are my challenges and opportunities? And then how can we start bridging?
Is that, sorry to interrupt, but is that similar to the Japanese notion of ikigai?
Very much, yeah. Mm-hmm. So what I like about the ikigai is that it adds more layers mm-hmm. to the SWOT. So the SWOT is very analytic, and the ikigai adds meaning into that. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happens when you use a set of tools and set of practices. Mm-hmm. But another tool or practice that we can add here is different ways of connecting. And that could be connecting towards the outside. So it might be that you're working alone with yourself and you can gain some clarity, but you never use a soundboard. So by connecting to the outside, it could be other people, new perspective, people you haven't interacted with before because it felt like they're outside of your circle or they hold a different set of opinions. Mm-hmm. But it's very interesting actually to immerse in that diversity, to learn something new about yourself, to gain more clarity. Mm-hmm. In a way.
A question on that. In order to be able to do that and to expose yourself in that way, you already need to be grounded, which makes this recursive. So if you feel grounded, then it's easier for you to connect with other people that might challenge your points of views. But if you don't feel grounded yet, that would be of help. But how do you take the courage and build the courage to take this step?
Right. So here comes one of my favorite bits, probably because it's the most challenging one. Mm-hmm. And that is related to the word that we all use all the time, but I'm not sure we deeply explore that, authenticity. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean, authenticity? Basically, it's very trendy now, right? It's a buzzword almost, mm-hmm. authenticity, but what does that mean? And for me, it's about first finding your internal voice, internal truth, mm-hmm. but then be able to speak up mm-hmm. and stand up for that and take a stand, even if it's not popular, mm-hmm. even if you will be judged. And oftentimes we are judging ourselves way before we are judged by others. Mm-hmm. So for me, authenticity would be not only to find that voice, but actually to find the courage to vocalize that. Mm-hmm. And that by itself, it takes time, it's a practice, but it grounds you because you start to gain this confidence that you do not only have your truth, but you actually taking it to the external circle, mm-hmm. and you stand up for that. And once you are grounded with your truth, with your stand, with what you believe in, with your set of values, mm-hmm. then comes what you just mentioned, which is how do you connect it to the outside, to the different voices coming in.
Mm-hmm. So if I envision that, we can act on a plane in a circle, but we can trigger ourselves into a positive feedback loop by some practice that grounds us or allows us to be more authentic, more connected with ourselves, whatever that means. I'd like to explore that question too. It could also go into the negative. If you trigger into something that triggers you into a negative feedback loop, that could also work. So what we are looking for is how to trigger ourselves when we're on the plane into a positive feedback loop that supports itself. So what you're offering is a couple of tools and practices to start moving in that direction, right? And you started with journaling. There's one twist on journaling that I've encountered that helps with authenticity, which is you journal and then you destroy. Because if you write out what what's in your mind and then you destroy that, then nobody will ever see this except for you. And this is maybe the first time in your life since you were a baby that you could be truly authentic, to let go of all of the dark things in your mind that you can then start working through them.
Yes, and.
Okay.
Yes, and I do believe that once you gain more confidence, and that could be actually done with external people, external connections, but we'll touch upon it in a minute. Once you've gone through that, you can actually take some of your journaling, some of your texts, and do make them public, being raw and vulnerable, of course, but still take it to the outside, knowing that this is you and this is how you show up. And now comes in bringing in the people, which is not everyone, and not everyone will support you. And some people will say they are supportive, but they come with their bias and maybe their judgment. So when you handpick those people that you can actually trust, that will always listen to you and accept you as you are, which is the real root of empathy, basically, then you can gain more confidence in the sense that you know that no matter what, you have just a handful of people that have your back all the time. And the idea of this deep listening is that not only they listen without judging, actually back what they've heard you said. And this is a positive feedback loop because you gain more clarity.
And so I can intellectually imagine putting my son out in the street. He's 10 years old and expelling him from home. I can intellectually imagine that. I cannot live that, right? It's unlivable for me to do that. On the positive end, I can intellectually imagine what you're telling me, but for some people, that's unlivable. They have a hard time connecting with other people on the level you're talking about. And I think that's the hard portion of triggering oneself into that loop. What do you see from your conversations with other people or from your research, how to overcome that fallacy of intellectually you grasp it, but emotionally you don't?
I think it takes one good, solid experience to fix a lot of bad experiences happened in the past. I can give a live example if you want.
Yeah, please.
So for many, I don't know if for many years, but for years, I kind of knew within that I want to work in some sort of social aspect. I want to take it out. I want to work with social justice, something around that. It was so vague. And also people kept telling me, including people I love and appreciate from my family, but they kept telling me, this is not realistic. You will not earn money. You will not create the change that you want. You are naive, etc., etc., etc. So there's a chain of harmful reactions almost that put me in another direction for years. But then I met one person I'm married to, by the way, today. And he kept encouraging, he kept encouraging me to actually follow my choices. Mm-hmm. And at some point I told him, this is not realistic. I was perpetuating the voices that I kept hearing. And he told me, so what? Let's just do it. And we ended up in a long journey abroad and back, and studying and back and working and back. And from there, it was easier for me to identify more people that could support my voice. And now I'm surrounded with those people. But again, it takes one experience, one person who can believe in you and help you to put out your voice. So the voice is yours, but the support is still external. It has to be a combination. It has to come both from within, but also from the outside. So you know you're not speaking to an empty void.
So that one person, which I would consider more a process, can trigger or give you the foundation for that trust and for that building of an environment that supports what you want to achieve. And you said that since we're trying to identify tools and practices to identify objectives to work towards, you started with the self. So we have to reflect, and then this emerges out of it. You just gave an example of you could feel it, but it couldn't be voiced. So you had to create the environment that actually allowed you to voice it. So in essence, you're saying if you start reflecting, and the tools are out there, you can do journaling, meditation, take long walks. If you start doing that and create at least one person layer of outside support, then you're on a good path.
Yes, but we need to keep in mind that it's not a linear process. It could be very iterative. So you will find yourself, and that's perfectly okay and natural. You will find yourself sometimes taking a few steps back and keep questioning what you're doing. But then again, with some good practice, you can find yourself your way out of those pitfalls, which is again connecting to the outside, reaching out for help, support, advice, whatever you need. Sometimes we don't need advice. Sometimes we just need someone to listen to us, right? People are always in a hurry to give advice. Maybe this is not what we want. Maybe we just need someone to actually listen to us. And then some more practices. It could be anything basically that balances your routine and emotional state. I think it takes a lot of practice to find what works for you and what serves you well. Because oftentimes when we try to follow those formulas and those recipes, and we look at other people and we say, this guy is meditating, why is it not working for me? Well, because you're another person. Maybe you want to go out dancing and release your energies there and feel more alive and go back to do what you're doing. And that's, again, that's natural. It's not about fit with the formulas and with what other people are doing. This is about going back to authenticity, finding your own self and what works for you, basically.
And this ties back into the second part of the question, which is how do you care for yourself? Because unless you know, unless you have a clear feeling about whether it's better for you to meditate or dance, you're probably lost in that question. So you need to find ways of caring for yourself and loving yourself, which is for many people very hard. What do you find there?
It is. And it's hard for a few reasons. Some people, I think the majority of us, were raised on the perception that taking care for ourselves is laziness.
Mm-hmm.
Some research find that we correlate busyness with hard work and success. So when we are busy, that means that we are successful. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm so busy. And that became a status symbol, right? So part of it is, to just break down this habit of keep being busy, which doesn't mean that we can't do the hard work. That's, again, perfectly fine and normal. It's a question of how do we also allocate time for self-care? So if you'd ask me what's the first step that people shared with me that is working for them, is to actually put time for self-care in your agenda, in your routine.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it doesn't work for you naturally, then make it happen. Just like you're making time for business development and for whatever needs to be done, also for self-care. Yeah, it's important for me to have coffee today with a friend. It's not laziness, it's not counterproductive, right? So this is part of the thing. But yeah, of course, many other practices that fit into there about the self-care.
Do you have good examples of people? So let me step one back. You refer to business and being busy as a status symbol, and in my experience, it's very hard to trigger people out of that view on the world. And what helps is showing highly successful people that actively take care of themselves. So these are great examples that people could hold on to. Do you know of any?
I know of quite a few. There's a fantastic book by Arianna Huffington. Her basically her latest book called Thrive, where she described how she hit the wall of burnouts, being too busy, and how she changed it. For her, the main thing was to get good night's sleep. It's not the case for all the people, but for her, again, it was the self-exploration. What was she missing? A good night's sleep, to put the boundaries, less screen time, making the office more human-centered, where people can, interact and even eat healthy and stuff like that, and take a nap. Again, it's around the sleeping. So this is one great example of someone who was highly busy doing meaningful work, and she had to find out the hard way when she collapsed that it's time to set those boundaries that we referred to before. The thing is that people, again, can find this liberty of self-care in many aspects, but it's a question of choice. And I think that, again, the first step, other than, allocating time, is just simply to ask the right question, the honest question. I'm so busy, but am I enjoying it at the same time? I was just recently at a workshop, and I had at the break time a conversation with a CEO of a wonderful social initiative. I love this woman, she's doing great work, and we had this conversation in the break, and she said, well, I listened to everything you said. I'm not sure how to implement that in my organization. And I asked her, how do you measure the success of your organization? And she said, well, we are highly successful because we are reaching this and that amount of people, we're making this and that impact. Great, you haven't mentioned a single word about the well-being. So how do you measure success when well-being is being fit in, the well-being, the personal well-being of the people?
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of pause and said, wow, I never thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an easy question. It's a question of measurement, right? When we're pushing
Mm-hmm.
towards success, we define it and measure that. Why aren't we measuring well-being, our own well-being?
I think there's a deep underlying reason for that, which is on an economic level, we're not connecting success with well-being. We're connecting success with financial profit, because that's what our monetary system is based on, more even than our socioeconomic system. So I think that this might be an underlying reason for that. And it sounds like that organization is already far down the line. But one person in that respect, which is probably weaker in the sense that um, that he is not so. It doesn't appear to be so deeply aligned, but he's extremely highly successful, which was Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett explicitly states that the core element of the job of the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway is to read and learn, not to be out there. He proudly presents an empty itinerary on the Charlie Rose show, because he doesn't fill it with stuff. He has time. And apparently he's been doing that all his life. So I like that as an example, because that shows people that one of the richest men in the world actually is not busy. I mean, he does things, but he's not busy in the way we are busy when we think about busyness as you described it.
It's very interesting example, and there's a lot of conversation going on now on how productive are we when we work too many hours, right? So that's part of it for sure. There's been a very successful experiment done by, I think it was Microsoft, I hope I'm not wrong here, in Japan, with one of their departments, that they actually send the employees home every fourth or fifth day, and the productivity was actually higher in 40%, which is amazing, but not surprising when you come to think about it. So yeah, there's a lot of going on there, ongoing conversation about what you just said. It's not about being so busy to be successful. This is about doing the things right in an effective and healthy way. And by the way, when you take time for self-care, you become even more creative and innovative. Again, another buzzword, innovation. We need a free mind for that.
Do you know, so they measured productivity. Did they also measure well-being? So it could be that the people needed that extra day to relax, to work even harder, to achieve the 40% increase. But that's the way you describe it, it doesn't seem to be like that.
Yeah, and they didn't. That was the that was the part probably missing. And again, the good news is that something is being done. It doesn't mean that we don't have more work to do. So thank you for highlighting that they did not measure well-being. And in Japan, in generally, there's a culture of being also after work with your boss, and it's another challenging part to work on that.
So we have to hope that they didn't secretly work on that additional freedom.
Yes, I don't know. You never know.
Okay, so but I can relate to that. I spend a lot of time with my son, and I know that when we're, let's say, we're out on the river with a little boat, and we're playing pirates, and we're hijacking other boats. just by that activity, which is so far removed from what I do during the rest of the day, I give my brain space to work through stuff. And during those activities, I get ideas and epiphanies on work stuff that I quickly have to store away for later use. But and so letting go actually can be a very productive act.
I agree. And I think probably our challenge, or one of the biggest one, is not even the workload. It's the letting go part.
Mm-hmm.
Letting go of everything, right? Letting go of control, of the idea that we're different and mistake and we can't fail. Letting go of all those limitations and all those expectations. So once we start practicing this letting go, everyone at the related field, it definitely takes us forward in the sense of this self-care. But I also want to mention here that I do the same with my kids during the weekends. So we go hiking and I don't take my cell phone with me deliberately. I take an old camera to shoot photos so I can be really disconnected. However, during the week, my solution for that is to actually involve them in my work. So I know I need to work now, or at least be occupied. So I keep talking with them about what's going on. And they are involved in what I do. And sometimes this doesn't exist there, but not because I want to work all day. It's because I don't want to shut the door and tell them, I'm working now. We cannot have a dialogue on that. And having this dialogue and involving them at what I do helps me to be grounded.
Okay. Do you also experience that some resistance within yourself to do that? So it would be probably easier, at least on the surface of it, to just say, "I'm working."
If I find resistance to that, in what way? In the way that they're involved, or in the way that
within yourself? Because let's say there is a pressing thing you have to solve, and now you have the option of closing the door and saying, "I need to work," or explaining the situation to the kids. I take from what you're saying, and also from my experience, that explaining is the better option on multiple levels, but it is in conflict with the rest of the world that is demanding your attention right now.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, good question. So explaining is definitely part of it. I would call it communicating. Sometimes it's not about explaining, it's about communicating. I can't be responsible for what everyone, not only my kids, everyone understand. I can communicate it. Second, it's a question of what is happening now. So if I'm now giving, I don't know, a webinar, yes, the door will be closed because I'm broadcasting. It could be that I'm having a call, a conversation, and my kids need me at times. And again, it depends with whom. It could be with my teammates. So it's perfectly fine if one of my kids will enter now and ask a question, need my attention. And my colleagues know, my teammates know, I'm also a mother and not only the CEO of the organization. And I'm happy with that because over those years, I remember when I was naive, I thought I can't do that. I need to kind of hide my kids under the table when I'm having a business call. It doesn't happen anymore. If the rest of the world can handle that, that's not my problem. Again, it doesn't mean that in certain situations when I need to be fully focused and maybe teach or facilitate, I'm fully there, the door is closed, or I'm outside of the house, obviously, or whatever. But in some situations, I'm perfectly fine with being under these two hats of a mother and a change maker, and maybe several hats at the same time.
so that requires you to balance between yourself, the world, the people, and something in between, which are the people that you care most about. And what I would love to have for myself is Jack Sparrow's compass. Have you watched Pirates of the Caribbean? No.
It sounds familiar. I can't recall if I watched it.
So Johnny Depp plays this pirate, and he has a compass, and that compass seems to be broken because it doesn't point north. Because it points towards what he wishes for most.
Yeah.
So he can use this to not only steer, but also to find out what he cares about most. Right? So if he knows what he cares about most, he can just look at the compass and know where it is. If he doesn't know what he cares about most, he takes the compass and looks and sees where it's pointed, so he knows what he cares about most. And this is a powerful tool, but it doesn't exist. So we have to somehow create that compass within ourselves. And I think this is what we're trying to figure out here. How do we create that kind of compass?
How about asking honest questions?
Mm-hmm.
Honest questions. Not just questions here, but questions. Questions that we might be afraid to hear the answer to, but it still needed to be asked. And what if we are open to at least test what comes out of this self-inquiry? At least test.
That's an interesting thing. So in real life, how do you create these tests?
I can ask myself, am I really doing now what I would like to do? Not just the surface level of, am I in a happy place, which is important, but maybe it's not deep enough. Am I really doing what I care about and care for? Or something that is designed to meet external expectations or external limitations, which define my own limitations.
So asking all these questions to yourself is hard.
Yeah.
But answering them honestly is even harder.
Answering them honesty is harder if you are committed to follow, to take actions. Up until now, it's just talking, which is important, but it's just the foundations. So I would say that the challenge is to take the honest reply and actually follow through.
But what if, so we talked about testing, and testing in the way you described it happens in your mind. So you create that scenario of that you want to test. You test it in your mind by asking those questions. And within that also lies that there is no necessity to take action because you're testing.
I think there's always necessity to take action, even if it's on a small scale to begin with. I think the action here is important because otherwise it stays as a dream, as a vision, and you're not shaping your reality. So another question comes here that can bridge between the scary answer to what you want to do and the action. Another connecting question could be, what's the worst that could happen if I fail? Seriously, what's the worst case scenario? Will I go bankrupt? Will I be mocked in the middle of town? Is this still happening? On social media? Will people disconnect with me because I'm saying stuff that they don't want to hear? What's the worst thing that can happen? What is the cost? So for me, for example, if the cost is harming my family, I might not follow that, right? But if the cost is a few people judging me for saying something or doing something, maybe I can bear with that and move forward.
So you play that out in your mind, and then you might decide not to take action because the result of the game in your head is negative. You tested reality and you said, no, not for me.
Yes, it might definitely be that. But it begs just more questions. What am I afraid of? Is that a real fear of survival, or is that something else?
Mm-hmm.
This is why I'm saying these are honest questions. What am I really afraid of? What's the worst case? What is the cost of that? What am I willing to go through, etc., etc. When you're ready and willing to be fully honest with yourself, that's when you have the mind breakthrough, and you can, pursue.
So you don't accept no as an answer from yourself in these mind games about testing something that you should or want to do. So you ask the next question. If your answer is no, I won't do it, then your question is basically why. This reminds me of Kaizen of Toyota, ask why 5 times. Is this something similar? How do you know?
Yeah.
Have you made an experience of, I have to ask like a certain number of times, then it starts saturating?
Yeah, I've heard about this this set of questions from a friend. I quite liked it. She framed it in another context. She's building airplanes. But I found it very applicable to many fields. Yeah, I would say it's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that we cannot say no to ourselves. It's just not give up too fast because maybe we're not aware of why are we saying no. Sometimes we are fooling ourselves. I know sometimes it's hard to hear that. It's been hard for me to realize that I'm, almost fooling myself in certain areas.
Okay. So that requires, to go back to the beginning, a lot of courage and being stable. And what I'm curious about is how to click that into action, how to get that to actually work, because I see many people struggling with the first step. What you're describing sounds like an advanced level in that sense, and being able to steer so clearly without being allowing other people to interfere unless you agree with your plan. So is a tough thing to do for many people, which leads us back to compass and creating the first instance of personal stability that allows you to start taking these kind of steps. Yeah. So you were lucky in finding a partner who was supporting you in that sense, and the way you describe it, everything evolved out of that. What would you recommend to somebody who hasn't had that kind of luck yet?
Great question. I would recommend 2 things as the first steps, and I also sense they should come simultaneously. One is to find your grounding practice, what helps you to stay grounded and not only happy. Again, happiness is important, but that you feel assured with yourself. Mm-hmm. It could be anything from, the mindfulness and from doing sports and from any practice that is good for you, that release some endorphins and some good energy there. And simultaneously, go and reach out and find someone that you can trust and you can talk with. A friend, a mentor, a group of people, and start interacting with them. Probably what will happen, and I know not only for myself, I've seen it hundreds of times, if not more, from the people I've been talking with, is that this person will lead you further on to what eventually will become your tribe, probably your tribes in plural, for most people. So if you have your practice and you have at least one person that, even if it's not your best friend, is someone that you can talk to, and he will listen to you, even without sharing advice, just listen. Take these two together and you are ready to take the first step, whatever it is. Let's take a really, really simple, quick example. You want to start putting content out there. People are afraid to shoot themselves on video, right? And put it on social media. That's a common example. But if you know you have a few people that will immediately support and say something, great job, you feel more confident with it, right? So you start doing that and you gain more clarity and more confidence, and you improve along the way, just because you receive this empathy, this kind of back.
Okay. So that seems doable, and I think that's something that's a good reason for sports clubs and dancing, and because that's where you can combine these two elements very often, meeting people and engaging in some activity that releases endorphins. Now, going back to the next question about the big objective. So you you know what you want to do with your life, but that didn't just appear, right? You developed that. How do you know that this is actually the right thing for you to do, and that there isn't something else?
Yeah, I don't know. And that's because I let go of the idea that there's one perfect thing for me. It's the right thing for me now, because I feel alive when I'm doing that. I feel passionate about it. I'm committed. I love what I do. I don't know if this will be the case in 5 years. So I'm good with the idea of letting go once it's not serving me anymore. I have plans for 20 years, don't get me wrong. But I also know that this is how I feel now, and that's okay to evolve. But I want to share an advice that it's not mine. It's from a talk by Elizabeth Gilbert, the author. And she said, people are so occupied with follow your passion. What if you don't know what your passion is? You simply don't know. This could be very scary. I don't know what my passion is. What am I supposed to chase there? And she said, what if instead of follow your passion, we will follow our curiosity? So you get curious about one thing, one area, one field, one role even, I don't know, one industry, whatever. And you start following this curiosity, and it leads you to the next stepping stone and the next stepping stone. And before you know, energy that is weaved with your curiosity. And you follow that. So yeah, I agree that at some point you do want to have this vision and this goal where you're heading. I'm not dismissing that. I think it's actually very important. What I'm saying is that if we start really hard to think, what is our vision? It could be also very stressful. So one method would be to actually follow your curiosity. What do you care about? What interests you? And from there, you kind of starting to move on.
I'm hearing you talked about caring about something. You can feel that caring through curiosity, but you also said you love what you do. So is it possible that having the feeling of love for what you do is an effect of you being aligned with your objective, so that Love could be, the feeling of love could be an indicator that you're doing the right thing.
I think so. I'm being careful here because it might be that people are still aligned with their cause, but they don't necessarily feel the love or don't feel the love yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm being careful here because if someone who's now listening thinks, well, I'm passionate about what I do, I'm committed to it, I don't know if I love it, you know, that's a powerful feeling. I don't think there's something wrong with not loving what you do. I think the indicator should go the other way around. I'm not satisfied. I'm suffering. I'm in pain. I'm under a lot of pressure.
That is an indicator that you're headed in the wrong direction.
In the wrong place, exactly.
But then on the path of finding your objective, you reintroduce that notion of care and love by saying, follow what you care about in your path of curiosity, because that might lead you towards something that you love.
Yes. So in that sense, yeah, it takes time to do what you love, but it doesn't take a lot of time to understand what you care about and start acting upon them. If you care about specific issues, and we all care about something, right? You can just start exploring it. You don't have to do it as a work, as a living, as an income. You can start by just volunteer or do something small on a small scale and check that curiosity. We all care about something. How do people get to do what they do?
So you find easy ways to test things, to play with things in reality. Is in the grounding sense, so engaging in some easy activity, sport, maybe some small talk with a colleague there, and that evolves into you being more stable. On the other hand, you can start playing with your objective by engaging in activities and curiosity around things that you care about. So this sounds like a very easy recipe that everybody could follow to start moving into something they might love and that is aligned with them.
I believe so. I love that you say play with. We sometimes forget to be playful. And we need to be reminded about playfulness and not only how enjoyable it is, but how important it is for self-development. Because when we're playful, it's almost like we forget those self-limitations. We don't think, oh, it's not possible, it's not feasible, it's not realistic. We're just being playful now. Everything almost is allowed, right?
But that again is in conflict with the busyness. So you
Why is that?
I know what you mean, but I have a hard time imagining some people that are very busy to allow themselves to be playful, just in the sense, in the same way we said they don't allow themselves to care for themselves. So how do you explain to somebody who's really, really busy that being playful is actually helpful?
I don't explain, I show them.
Okay.
I came to a group of people a month ago for a workshop. They were very busy, but they gave me time for a workshop. Okay. So I entered the room with big paper sheets and colorful pencils. Yeah. And we brainstormed, and before we knew it, everyone was sketching and playing and drawing. And that was playing. And they had a hard time to stop when the time was in. Because it took them a few years to get their hands on a colorful pencil. This is playfulness for busy people, serving the cause of their work. So it can go hand in hand if we have this out of the box thing in some ways.
So, if I can paraphrase that, so you're saying that the whole design thinking craze is not so much about coming up with ideas, but more helping people to give them an environment that they're allowed to be playful in, and the ideas that they come up with aren't really that relevant, but the fact that they allow themselves to play is relevant.
I think it's both. The ideas are relevant, but yeah, the design is important. You can help reduce world poverty. You can help eliminate hunger and still create a beautiful world. You don't have to suffer while you're working to reduce world suffering. If you can manage your work in a creative way, it doesn't take off from the meaning of what you do. It's just a question of how do you design the process to get there.
Okay, so be playful. So I like using the example of learning how to walk. We try have like 400 attempts before we can actually walk. So we're playing with the idea of walking, mimicking other people that we see walking, because everybody else around us is not crawling like us, but they're walking. So we're trying to play with that and get to that. And within that lies a role of idols and maybe even rituals around that, because that, I think that is something we might have lost along the way in the last couple of 100 years, that we systematically establish idols that we want to strive towards, and establish systems, symbols, rituals around those idols that help us try and grow towards them. And do you see that helpful in any way?
I think it's again a question of what sort of questions are we asking ourselves? Am I following this example because I think this person is perfect? Probably not, because I never know what's going on behind the scenes. But I can follow this person's example of these few aspects that I admire, look up to, being inspired by. I can question some aspects and appreciate very much others. So it's never about making them an idol, but it's about this person wrote a great book that I can learn a great deal from. It doesn't mean that I resonate with what this person is doing in I don't know what. I think when you bring in the critical thinking, questioning, challenging, then you can still look up to people and be inspired. And even, I don't know, the proximity. You can love some people if you are close enough to know them. It still doesn't mean that you can't think of what should you filter out from these examples. And we had just recently a few examples of people that I mean high profile people that we never, as a public, as a society, we never knew how much they struggle in their own personal life. Taking a few years back, Robin Williams committed suicide, and Chef Anthony Bourdain, and now we had another example of the British anchor, a TV host. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, it's great to be inspired by people's words and actions. It doesn't mean that we need to take it as a whole. This is perfect as it is. I'm taking it, no filters, no questions, because that could be very harmful. We never know what's happening behind the screen. Yeah.
So there's you're basically liking that to Lego. I pick aspects from different idols and construct my own idol. Um, this reminds me of something I read in a book by Bettelheim once about the tribe that around an initiation rite for boys, those boys had to create a god for themselves, a god that would be like a partner, a guiding element in their life. But they created it themselves, and still as a symbol for having direction, it worked, which totally freaked me out because I didn't understand how something you would create yourself could be a guiding force for yourself.
Because it might be that what eventually guides us is not other people, is our inner voice that other people are helping to shed light on. So we always knew internally what is that we meant to be or do, but we could never fully see it because it was hidden under many layers of, again, social expectations and bad experiences. But could be another person who helps shed light on this inner truth, and suddenly you feel more comfortable. So yes, you are guided by something internal being exposed by external, the word external inspiration, influence.
So you could actually create that first person that is helping you take the first step out of yourself by creating a symbol of what you aspire to and calling that your god or idol or whatever you want to call it, and asking that thing questions, and just by externalizing that element of you physically, you can start asking different kinds of questions to yourself and get different kind of answers.
It sounds like a good approach.
I'd like to play with that.
I'd like to play with it. It sounds like a healthy approach.
Cool. So I think we've learned a lot about how to in a very easy way start nudging ourselves and working ourselves towards a life that we can truly thrive in because we love what we do and we're working on the right thing, and we love it because we're working on the right thing, and we also have the freedom to change that when we want. And I believe that if many people, 7.5 billion people, understand that and learn about techniques that help them, and you just offered some, that would have a massive shift and a massive impact on the path forward, which needs to be fast and decisive. So I want to thank you for that conversation, and thank you for the work you're doing towards helping people to connect with what they need to do and should do in the world.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
And maybe we can continue that conversation regarding the other elements. For especially what I would be curious about is the question of how do we steer 7.5 billion people towards a good future? Wow. But that's room for another conversation. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.